Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, मिशन लाइफ यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरमेंट, एक पेड़ मां के नाम जैसे इनिशिएटिव लिए गए हैं। पिछले वर्ष COP28 के दौरान हमने ग्रीन क्रेडिट जैसे महत्वपूर्ण पहल की शुरुआत की। मैं ब्रिक्स पार्टनर्स को इन इनिशिएटिव से जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। ब्रिक्स के सभी देशों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के निर्माण पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया जा रहा है। भारत में मल्टी मॉडल कनेक्टिविटी को तेजी से बढ़ाने के लिए हमने गति शक्ति पोर्टल बनाया है। इससे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर विकास के लिए इंटीग्रेटेड प्लानिंग और इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में मदद मिली है और लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट कम हुई है। हमारे अनुभव आप सभी के साथ साझा करने में हमें खुशी होगी। फ्रेंड्स, ब्रिक्स देशों के बीच फाइनेंशियल इंटीग्रेशन बढ़ाने के लिए प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। लोकल करेंसीज में व्यापार और सुगम रूप से क्रॉस बॉर्डर पेमेंट से हमारा आर्थिक सहयोग सुदृढ़ होगा। भारत द्वारा बनाया गया यूनिफाइड पेमेंट्स इंटरफेस यानी यूपीआई भारत की एक बहुत बड़ी सक्सेस स्टोरी है। इसे कई देशों में अपनाया गया है। पिछले वर्ष हिज हाइनेस शेख मोहम्मद के साथ मिलकर हमने इसे यूएई में भी लॉन्च किया। अन्य ब्रिक्स देशों के साथ भी इसमें सहयोग किया जा सकता है। फ्रेंड्स, भारत ब्रिक्स के अंतर्गत सहयोग बढ़ाने के लिए पूरी तरह से प्रतिबद्ध है। हमारी विविधता और मल्टीपोलरिटी में हमारा दृढ़ विश्वास हमारी ताकत है। हमारी यही ताकत और मानवता में साझा विश्वास हमारी भावी पीढ़ी के समृद्ध और सशक्त भविष्य को सार्थक रूप देने में सहयोग होगा। आज की बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण एवं उपयोगी चर्चाओं के लिए मैं सभी का आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। ब्रिक्स के अगले अध्यक्ष के रूप में मैं राष्ट्रपति लूला को हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। भारत आपकी ब्रिक्स अध्यक्षता की सफलता के लिए अपना पूरा सहयोग देगा। एक बार फिर राष्ट्रपति पुतिन और सभी लीडर्स का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Спасибо большое, уважаемый господин премьер-министр. Мы все говорим о необходимости обеспечить высокие темпы экономического роста. Вам это как раз удается.
So that's Prime Minister Narendra Modi encapsulating the key points that have been discussed by the BRICS nations and how they have pledged to move forward in this BRICS summit up until the next year when the 2025 BRICS happens. Coming back to my panelists and having this discussion, Ambassador Seth, so a number of issues that have been raised, and right now we see that President Pezeshkian of Iran is also speaking, and while there have been wide array of subjects that have been covered, the key issues and highlights that are going to be the focus area of BRICS are of course going to be the Ukraine conflict. We talk about the Middle East unrest. We also talk about the China and India closeness, or some, I wouldn't say closeness, but a thaw that seems to have happened in the last few days, and therefore this bilateral.
Absolutely. The BRICS summit, of course, is very significant, and a lot of important issues will be on the table, and its increased membership, I think that is also an interesting development, and with many more countries applying. Already 40% of the world's economy almost is covered in this grouping right now, with 5 original BRICS members and 4 more who have joined. And many others are also applying and have been invited to join. And I think this, and one of the main agendas is economic for the BRICS. and including a reform of all the economic and, the monetary institutions, world institutions right now, which have been, sort of tilted against the global south in many ways. So to reform those and to find a kind of, resolution to the current issues, I think the BRICS will play an important role.
Right.
And being the voice of the global south, and also, there's been talk of it being a counterbalance to the rest of the world and the West-led world. But I'm not sure we can, still as yet think of that. But yes, it is looking at crafting a kind of alternative in a multipolar world where things will be more evenly sort of distributed, and the resolution of various issues will include the voice of the global south, including in reform of all the various world monetary institutions, financial institutions.
Okay, also will be Dr. Vailawar. Then very interesting to know that the BRICS and its expansion has included countries like Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and UAE. Again, as was being referred to by Ambassador Manju, said that there is this grouping that has emerged that is an alternative to the G7s and the other groupings that have been where United States of America and the Western nations have been the hinge point, have been the linchpin of these groupings. Now, what is it? What does this signify? And the lack of any sort of statement, confrontational or aggressive, that has not come from United States of America or from the Ukrainian president, because the last time when he had shown his regret when the Prime Minister ended up meeting the Russian President.
Well, I think there are lots of changes, Meghna, taking place internationally, especially with the Russia-Ukraine war and the West Asian war going on. And we can see the US weathering influence in the world. And also the coming up election of the United States, where we don't know whether Trump will be back or will be continue with the Biden administration, Kamala Harris. The point here is that the outcome of the election will really determine how the world is heading. Because if Trump comes, he will always use the policy America first through the use of force and enforcing people, coercive forces, to come to the American term, whether it is in Asia, whether it is in West Asia, whether it is in Europe. So this is one of the issues which is making most of these countries coming forward to the BRICS to join for two reasons. A, because there are no more people are comfortable with the unipolar world, and they wanted a multipolar world where India, China, and Russia are calling for that, and South-South cooperation. These are one of the major issues, and addressing it on all the forum they are trying whenever they meet together. And I think with the India and China reapproachment, and also with the war going in favor of the Russia, these are issues. I think it is a big challenge for this group. And let us remember also one thing in this group, which is very important, is that from 4 members to 33 members are interested in joining, it should be looked at it as a force to reckon with in the future. It may not be a challenge to the Great Seven, G7 nation, but it could be also a force to reckon with.
Right, absolutely. It's an interesting point of view. Again, coming back to Major General J.K. Bansal, and we talk about the multipolarity in the world that has been divided amongst various fragments and groupings, as to say. And and the Ukraine conflict is at the center of it when it comes to the northern hemisphere. And there have been statements that have been issued by Prime Minister Narendra Modi talking about how he has spoken to the Russian president, talking about how peace and resolution and dialogue is the way ahead to build about a consensus and stop the war between Ukraine and Russia. Do you think this is going to help impact the way things are developing with the NATO and the United States of America supporting Ukraine against Russia, where there is Iran and India perhaps more neutral, and China which are backing Russia? What is going to be the end result?
India is keeping a balance between between West and other countries. India is seeing as a multipolar world, while China and Russia, they are thinking to have anti-West stance. And as far as you told about the Ukraine war, I don't think there is any effect going to be on Ukraine war about this coalition, because when it comes to this coalition for the war, then of course Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, they are on one side, and Europe and America on the other side. As far as India's doctrine is that the things can be resolved with dialogue and diplomacy, not by war, and that is the what India has also applied, that thing between China and India's border dispute settlement. Now, of course, it will give a recipe to Russia, because Russia was isolated with this particular meeting. Once so many countries, now 5 earlier countries and 5 more countries, 10 coming in Russia, it is giving a support to Russia that yes, still the countries are with him. But as far as the war is concerned, it is not going to affect. However, time and again, Mr. Modi has emphasized that there should be a talk between Russia and Ukraine, peace, and once a meeting is there, then Russia should be invited, because early in the June this year, there was a meeting in Switzerland and Russia was not invited in that. Similarly, the best part is that very, very important that all the countries, they are having faith and confidence in India, whether you take Western countries, Europe, Ukraine, Russia,
Okay.
on the one hand, and the Middle East also, the Iran and Israel, they are also equally having the faith. So India can play a major role for de-escalating and for the peace process.
Right, absolutely. Coming back to you, Gautam Mukherjee, it's an important, significant point that has been mentioned by Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he was addressing the BRICS summit, and he has said that we welcome the inclusion and the expansion of the BRICS summit, and we are wholeheartedly opening our doors and our hearts to the new member nations, and more significant amongst them being Iran and UAE and other Middle Eastern nations. Now, again, I said, how important does it become strategically to expand BRICS?
Well, the expansion of BRICS gives representation to a lot of people who are in a vacuum with the collapse of the UN. The UN and also those who are essentially like-minded. In BRICS, all the countries are interested in economic development, in military cooperation, as opposed to a kind of a political guild which the general body had turned into, and with all its factions, all the UN bodies, UNESCO, WHO, etc., have all become biased, infiltrated, in some cases corrupt. So BRICS is a breath of fresh air. Let's understand one thing, that the G7 consists of a lot of countries who are, really in dire straits economically. Think of Italy, think of Spain, even France, even Britain, to some extent the United States. So you come to basically the big three. You come to America, you come to Russia, which they've tried to shun at the G7, and you come to China. These are the people, and out of these three, two are dominant in BRICS, and along with India. India is sometimes also invited to the G7 and is a major player in the G20. So the world order is certainly changing to multipolarity, and all these forums, whether it is BRICS, whether it is SCO, whether it's ASEAN and a number of other such, are going to contribute to world policy and world cooperation with or without the approval of America and the G7. So this is a big, big change.
Okay.
It's going to be quite some time before currencies other than the dollar dominate. Some of the European currencies are also poor seconds. But in terms of political maneuvering as well as economic cooperation with or without the cooperation of the West, this is proceeding apace.
Okay, Ambassador Manju, important to note over here that China and Russia and the respective presidents have been conspicuous by their absence at the G20 summits that have taken place, both that was at India's chairmanship or now in Brazil as well. On the contrary, more focus, as was pointed out by Gautam Mukherjee as well, is being given to these other groupings that are taking place, whether it is BRICS, or we talk about the SCO summit that has happened in Pakistan. How does this and then there are nations like India that are participant in all these groupings. So there are polarizing views by certain countries, and then there are countries like India that are playing the balancing act. How are we poised to build our bilateral ties with countries like Russia and Iran and even China versus United States of America, Canada, Australia, and especially the Quad nations who have an agenda to fight the common enemy in the Indo-Pacific, which is China?
Absolutely. Now, this is what the new world is like. Very counter, sort of intuitive and counter. They go, contra each other. So it's a different new world now, and we have to do a balancing act. And India believes in balancing its interests with each of these nations. And I think it's not a one-size-fits-all or a one approach fits all. We see what is in our interest. So as you very rightly said, yes, the agenda of different organizations, of these multilateral organizations is different. But yes, we, have to see what is in India's interest. We don't have to look at what is in China's interest or what is in, in another country's interest. Yes, if our interests match, then we go along. But first and foremost, India has to safeguard its own interests. I think that is where we are, and that's how we are, sort of doing a balancing act by being in Quad, by being in the SCO as well, where though we had some concerns being in the SCO where China was trying to, push its BRI and other things. And so we were trying to, send a message, and of course to Pakistan that, we are not very comfortable with your continuing approach of supporting terrorism in India and encouraging terrorism in India. But we did say that SCO is also important for us. So I think this multilateral balancing act is what we need to do. And I think countries we see are in a similar kind of situation, and they are also balancing all their options and balancing their approach in each organization, giving primary sort of emphasis to their own interests.
Okay, all right. I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast, but I'd request my guests to stay on because on the other side of the break, it's rolling coverage of the BRICS summit that is going on currently. Visuals on your screens of all the big leaders, of the heads of the states who are participant, who are part of BRICS, and of course, on the sidelines, the very important, the focal point of today's discussions the entire day, it's going to be Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting for the first.
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया NewsX का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स आपको मौका देता है देश के दिग्गज एंकर्स के साथ काम करने का। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में आप बेहद नजदीकी से देख पाएंगे किस तरह से ITV नेटवर्क के दिग्गज पत्रकारों की टीम दिन रात खबरों पर काम करती है। इस कोर्स के दौरान आप सीखेंगे एंकरिंग की एक एक बारीकी उन एंकर्स के साथ जो देश को रखते हैं हर खबर से बाखबर। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का ये कोर्स आपके एंकरिंग स्किल्स को करेगा इतना सशक्त, मजबूत, जिससे आप बनेंगे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया का वो चमकता चेहरा जो दुनिया देखेगी और पसंद करेगी।
Right, so we are back on our conversation about the BRICS summit and more importantly the bilateral that we at this point of time are awaiting with bated breath, and what is going to be the outcome of it as Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets the President of China, Xi Jinping. Joining me on the telecast is right now Major Mohammad Ali Shah, and let's hear it from you, Major Shah, about particularly the implications of this summit that has taken place, and why are these nations so important when there is inclusion of Iran, UAE, we see Saudi Arabia, we see Egypt. All these Middle Eastern nations have been made part very consciously, very strategically of the BRICS summit. In fact, let me bring in Pathikrit Plain into the conversation. And Pathikrit, let's hear it from you. The same question about the grouping and its importance, especially after its expansion and all these nations that have been made part of it.
Well, I think the most important reason why there's so much of enthusiasm surrounding BRICS is because some of the issues concerning, say, SWIFT, which is used for international financial transactions by the banks, or dollar as a reserve currency, they have been weaponized so much by United States that people are fed up. For example, you have sanctioned Russia, you have sanctioned Iran. Anybody you don't like, you don't allow them to trade in dollar. You freeze their foreign exchange reserve, which is in dollar denomination. You do not allow them to use SWIFT. So eventually, people are fed up, and that's why many countries are showing enthusiasm towards BRICS on the expectation that BRICS might come out with an alternate payment mechanism, not a currency, but a payment mechanism. Secondly, yes, UPI is actually becoming very, very prominent. I see no reason, it doesn't mean that we are looking for a de-dollarized society or a world, but you're actually moving towards an alternate. You're keeping backups. For example, if I have to deal with UAE, why should I deal with dollar? I mean, there are many things that we export to UAE, and there are critical energy things that we take from UAE. So you can deal with the local currency. That is exactly what we were compelled to do with Russia, because Russia's foreign exchange reserve in dollar was banned, and SWIFT ban came because there were sanctions on them. So because there is so much of this weaponization of trade, weaponization of currency, weaponization of SWIFT, that has been done by the West, that there is so much of interest, whether it is in BRICS or in UPI, and I think this interest is only going to go up. But let me also say, BRICS has a lot of potential today. Countries are looking towards BRICS, but BRICS also needs to evolve. BRICS is still in that courtship mindset. You have one forum, one summit 1 year, and then next summit next year. Where is the BRICS secretariat? Where is the BRICS headquarters? People will prefer that if the secretariat comes up, if it has its own charter of what they want to do, then invariably it can just come up as an alternative to United Nations. They're not trying to replace United Nations, but there is an alternate, because many areas, whether it comes to dispute resolution, whether it comes to other areas, UN has failed, and US is termed as a Western-centric organization. So whether it is BRICS or UPI is part of a larger dimension of BRICS, these are all non-Western things being done, not anti-Western. For example, what has been the role of United Nations in terms of preventing the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or the tension that right now you witness in Middle East between Iran and Israel? Do you see any effort by United Nations to solve it? No. Forget about whether it will be successful or not. Compared to that, I am not saying things have become great between India and China, but I think both these countries have shown maturity in preventing a dispute from taking the shape of a major conflict in the border region. And I think that itself is a template that it is not necessary that West knows the best what is good for the rest all the time. There are Asian countries today which are showing the path as to how things can move forward. And that's why you see many countries, even when they have good relation with the West, are willing to come forward, be part of BRICS, as you see United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arab. They have good relations with United States, but I think somewhere they're also fed up with this one-sided, narrative building, lecturing, and interference that we generally witness from the Western countries. So I think it is a great scope, but whether BRICS lives up to the expectation, it's up to the BRICS whether they evolve to the next stage or not.
Okay, all right. I also have with me RVS Mani. Let's understand from you, RVS Mani, with regards to how these groupings that have now polarized the world. There are multipolarity that is witnessed across the globe. And on one side, when we have the Ukraine war that is escalating and the Middle East conflict, on the other hand, there are important players, which is Israel and Iran. In a situation such as this, a balancing act that is being struck by India, how successful are we in doing it?
Let me put it very much simply. The 35 years after the demolition of the Cold War, where one country had already, as my previous speaker had already said, one country had already emerged or usurped the role of a leader. We are getting to get this type of group. It is very surprising that it has taken 35 years, but it has come. And it is good that it has come, and it's very important that certain major powers, especially the emerging powers like India, are lending leadership to it. So that's very important, and it will attract more and more people. Dollarization is one aspect of it. We are our own UPI, which is spread. As it said, it is not replacement of dollar. But it's a case of an alternate transactional, financial transactional methodology or an instrument which has been developed by the Indian IT sector or with the core IT sector, and that's a very successful and a robust system, and many countries are happening. But to give a sort of a inter-country agreement, inter-country arrangements to legitimize this type of UPI on trade, etc., Brics and such similar, the enlargement of Brics, the more and more Brics enlargement happens, it will be a sort of a counterweight to the American hegemony which has been happening. Certain areas, for example, the United Nations, again, Batikrit said that the United Nations has not been very successful in addressing certain major concerns like that. The basic question is, have they been successful with the MDGs? How far they have been successful with the SDGs? Or these MDGs and SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are simply case of peddling the trade interests of only select few? These are all questions which are still to be answered. MDGs full-fledged implementation has not been validated, has not been confirmed, and UN reports are how much valid they are. You and I know much more than the report speaks. UN's role in dispute resolution is another $1 million question, whether it is Ukraine and Russia, or whether it is the Gulf crisis, etc. They are seem to be running with the hare and hunting with the hound, which is not going to, which is not sustainable. Is that? And UN is slowly getting relegated due to their lopsided, prejudiced stand on several places. It is not just being, it was certain adverse to the entire goal of Charter of United Nations, the real-time act. I have huge respect to the UN Secretariat, but it is happening. So in this context, evolution of emerging of the alternate such multilateral fora is a very natural consequence. And as it is said, now the BRICS has to evolve, and it has to evolve, and it also has to factor in or facilitate. See, what has been United Nations' biggest folly has been, it has been an overbearing body trying to push it through, like the WTO. The WTO under the aegis of the trade mechanism as an overbearing thing for the one-stop solution for the entire world. How much it was successful? Non-tariff barriers, only tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers. How this was something that was best left to the FTA route, or this was best left to the bilateral route. But the WTO tried to overbear and push it through the entire world, all the 200 nations. But I hope the BRICS as an evolution process will keep these lessons in mind, whether it is on the human rights concern, whether it is the trade concern, that the bilateral issues, because the wearer only knows where the shoe pinches. The bilaterally, whether they are able to settle it through the FTA route or any other mutual agreement route, on not only the trade issues, on legal assistance, on the counterterrorism, certain things that, for example, the India-China are trying to resolve. One of the major achievements of the landmark achievement of this is a dispute, a disagreement hanging on for 4 years since 2020. Now they are trying to come out to a sort of a
Yes, okay,
agreement.
sir.
Agreement.
All right.
That's a very major
Yeah,
landmark.
yes, absolutely. I also have with me
So-
Major Ali Shah, and I'm going to
Thank you.
sort of, take this conversation to the Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi bilateral. This has happened in wake of the thawing of relations, a sort of thawing of relations after the process of de-escalation that has started. How does this impact the India-China relations, and how soon do you think this de-escalation and demilitarization is going to then be achieved and to the status quo ante that India wants China to follow?
Right, Mega. Our Prime Minister is there in Russia for the second time this year, in fact. At the big summit, we saw the way he was received, and he was received by the Indian diaspora at the hotel, and there was an Indian dance that took place. And so now also Xi Jinping is also there in Russia. China and Russia are friends. So I think it was a good thing. Okay, we can see the only way forward is through dialogue. When they either fight with someone, and if we sit with our egos that, oh, I'm fighting with so and so, I'm not going to communicate with so and so, I'm not going to talk to them, I'm not. That's not a solution. Solution is a dialogue, always. So the very fact is now at the Brics summit, when President Putin, and he has got China over there as well, got India also, I think it's a good sign, it's a very, very positive sign. It's a very, very positive development. And then with regards to de-escalation, just about 2 days back, we had seen that both the countries had decided to de-escalate, to actually, but the golden question over there was, can China want to be trusted or not? That's a different thing that time will tell. Though it's very, very difficult to say, because they've never honored any of our pacts, be it the Panchsheel Pact, be it any of the pact. So it is a little tricky right now, because despite the fact that we know we may not be able to trust China, our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, is a great leader. He's there. So hopefully he should be able to handle things in as per the correct manner. And he would be meeting the head of states of the other countries over there. So let's hope and see that some solution comes in over here, because as Robert Frost's poem says, good fences make good neighbors. But unfortunately, in the entire 3,488 kilometer stretch of line of actual control, there is no fencing. There is all a perception. So they are often both the side of the troops, they come face to face, and here's a face off. Thereafter, it happened many a time. So let's see that through dialogue in the Brics summit, when something, you never know, it could be a good solution could come out of this, perhaps.
Okay, all right. On the telecast with me, Sanjiv Srivastav, again about India and China. Do you think we should now be trustful of China after this rapprochement that seems to have happened from the other side?
Well, Mega, I think mistrust has been deep, and for which China's action in 2020 is clearly responsible. Before that, we have had several mechanisms through which peace and tranquility had been established for a very long time, for decades after 1962. Though there have been some, tense moments and clashes, etc. also. But largely, India-China border areas have been peaceful till Galwan incident happened, and because of the Galwan incident, this mistrust between India and China, two largest populated country in the world, two neighbors, two major powers, have been have gone deep, and that for that to restore, I think this step which has been taken, this agreement, this understanding which has been reached upon with regard to our patrolling arrangement in Depsang and Demchok area is a constructive development. But as far as the larger relationship is concerned, whether it will have this kind of a wisdom in future too, which has prevailed now, we can only hope. And for that to do, I think a lot of work needs to be done from the Chinese side.
Right.
It is China which has to take concrete actions on the ground to restore that mistrust which developed after the Galwan incident. So I would say that this is just a beginning of a new phase of a relationship, and for both the nations must work for it. And if that happens, if the wisdom continue prevailing in future negotiations too, it will be good not only for the two giant neighbors, but also it will give a very clear message and a very constructive message to the whole world that we are moving towards
Right.
greater peace, stability, and prosperity. That's what I would say.
Okay, Major General J.K. Bansal, particularly the friction points that was Demchok and Depsang, where Indian troops were not allowed to patrol. Has that okay, all right. I don't have Major General J.K. Bansal with us on the telecast with me, but coming back to you, Sanjiv Srivastava, I'm going to again ask this question to you about, this is particularly about the demilitarization emphasis that has been put by India time and again, and at the same time these Demchok and Depsang friction points where India had up until now been not allowed to patrol, with the Chinese military taking offense and guarding these areas. Do you think there could be a resolution sought on these matters, which has also been spoken about by the Ministry of External Affairs and our Foreign Minister?
Well, Megha, I think current problem was there because of which this India-China relationship became abnormal is precisely because China disrupted the status quo in April 2020. And India's demand was very much clear to the Chinese side whenever we spoke to them in our commander level talks or WMCC level talks, that you have to first restore the status quo which was there in April 2020. Until the time you deal with all issues, address all the issues and resolve all those friction points, India-China relationship is not going to be normal. And China addressed some of the issues like Galwan Valley, Pagang So, Gogra Hot Spring, and disengagement happened thereafter. But Depsang and Demchok area was still not having the same kind of status which was there in April 2020. So now China has agreed to restore the status quo of April 2020 in Depsang and Demchok too. I think after that only India agreed to go ahead with this kind of a bilateral talk. Okay. So I hope that this kind of a wisdom, as I said, the wisdom has prevailed. It is a constructive development. But one more point I would like to make, Megha, that India-China border areas, 3,488 kilometers area, this entire border is not clearly and properly demarcated. As I was saying in the morning too, that it is high time that India-China governments and the entire establishment of both the nations, they come together and initiate the process of a dialogue for demarcating the entire India-China border areas. Okay. And if that happens, that could be a long-drawn process.
That's a long way to go. Like I said, while we may have established a status quo, or at least, the starting point where are going to move forward, and whether this de-escalation and demilitarization happens in subsequently, and how many months does it take to happen is something that we will have to gauge continuously. And Patikrit, again, how trustful can we be of China at this point? We have taken a look last 5 years ago. In the last 5 years, there has been no communication whatsoever, no formal talks between the two heads of the states. The last visit of Xi Jinping was in India, in Tamil Nadu, and right after that there had been strong statements, inflammatory statements that have been issued by the Chinese ministry, by Xi Jinping himself, and then there comes the Galwan issue. So again, while we are using this rapprochement to improve our ties, we have to look behind our shoulders and figure it out that China is not to be trusted wholeheartedly.
Well, first and foremost, we are having disengagement, de-escalation. We are not having demobilization or de-induction. The border, at the borders, the machine-for-machine deployment, troop-for-troop deployment that India did, that remains intact. Nobody is lowering the guard. Nobody is saying that from tomorrow onwards, Chinese will have a free run in India. So it is just to ensure that we go to the pre-April 2020 situation where we maintain a certain kind of status quo, because I think both the countries, whether it is China and India, they have shown maturity in ensuring, as I mentioned earlier, that we do not allow the dispute to take the shape of a conflict. Now, there are areas of convergence, there are areas of divergence, there are areas of status quo between India and China. Yes, there are areas of divergence. We do not have a settled border. But at the same time, there are areas of convergence as well. For example, number one, both the countries do realize that it is not in the interest of either of the two countries to have a conflict, number one. Number two, India will still not allow Chinese investment in its critical infrastructure sector. So Chinese imports in consumer sector, consumer durable is fine. But I think India continues with its program for production-linked incentive for making India a manufacturing hub and reducing dependence on China, whether it is for intermediate range products or finished products. We have seen a lot of things have been happening in that area. Third and very important issue is this, that at a time when you have conflicts happening both in the Eastern European theater or Middle East, I think both the countries do realize having a conflict is going to be catastrophic. Now, we are not saying that we will trust China from tomorrow. The army chief has mentioned it. It is just to ensure that we go back to the pre-April 2020 era so that we can focus on many other things and instead of 24/7 thinking that a conflict is down the corner. I think to that extent, both the countries have shown maturity. And let me also reiterate, Megha, there were countries, some in the West, who were desperate to see that China gets into a conflict or India gets into a conflict with China. We have avoided that. And I think also it is important to understand, even today, the issues have not been 100% sorted out. India has not claimed, the government of India is not claiming that everything is hunky-dory. We do have a problem with China's arming of Pakistan. We do have a problem with alleged Chinese interference in Middle East, and those will be dealt as it is. The reason, please understand, the reason why China has also agreed for this engagement is because they have also realized the kind of military modernization, the kind of military deployment India has done in the last few years. It is unprecedented, and India has shown that if something starts in Ladakh, it will not end in Ladakh. It can end somewhere else. Okay. And I think that kind of military preparedness itself is the reason why China has agreed. This is the first time in the history of China since 1949 that they have agreed to something like this and not done what the salami slicing thing they do. India's military deployment, India's guarding, India's
I think India is too strong at this point of time to have any kind of salami slicing tactics that have been utilized by China in the rest of the subcontinent, or for that matter in the ASEAN region. So that's something that has been categorically dismissed by India and forcefully put forth the point across to China. I'm out of time. I thank all of my panelists for joining me on the telecast. Stay tuned on the other side. It is the bilateral that is the focus point, and it is going to take place at 5 p.m. So stay tuned.
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया NewsX का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स आपको मौका देता है देश के दिग्गज एंकर्स के साथ काम करने का। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में आप बेहद नजदीकी से देख पाएंगे किस तरह से ITV नेटवर्क के दिग्गज पत्रकारों की टीम दिन रात खबरों पर काम करती है। इस कोर्स के दौरान आप सीखेंगे एंकरिंग की एक एक बारीकी उन एंकर्स के साथ जो देश को रखते हैं हर खबर से बाखबर। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का ये कोर्स आपके एंकरिंग स्किल्स को करेगा इतना सशक्त, मजबूत, जिससे आप बनेंगे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया का वो चमकता चेहरा जो दुनिया देखेगी और पसंद करेगी।